Hello and welcome to this updated video guide for completing the Dying in Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. My name is TSDS and in this video you'll learn everything you need to know to remember. There's quite a few things to avoid here, but overall Hades is pretty easy, so let's take a look. As the tank, pull the boss and face him away from the group. As the off tank, you're basically a DPS for this fight. Now, the tank buster here is called Ravenous Assault, but do note that it hits in an AoE on the tank, shown by this red circle. If you're not a tank, don't stand in this. One of the first moves you'll see is called Bad Faith. Hades will move to the middle of the room and summon two huge spiky walls. Both walls will have huge spikes sticking out, but they'll be pointing in opposite directions. When the cast for this move goes off, the sections of the room in front of the spikes will get hit, so position yourself on the other side of one of these walls, behind the spikes. During this first phase, you'll also see Hades cast Double. After Double, he will always follow up immediately with either Dark Eruption or Shadow Spread. Dark Eruption marks 5 players with this pink AoE indicator, but before it goes off, each marked player will drop an additional AoE on the ground thanks to Double. Spread out to avoid overlapping hits, but just keep in mind that you'll need to avoid both the pink AoE and the additionally dropped AoE. Shadow Spread on the other hand causes Hades to emit 6 fairly narrow cone AoEs around him. Avoid these, but thanks to Double he will repeat this attack and the AoE and safe zones will get reversed. Just move left and right a bit to avoid them, it's easy enough. The next move I'm going to explain is the hardest one to avoid in this entire fight, meaning it's once again time for Learning with Tom. That's me! In today's episode we're going to avoid Broken Faith. Take a look at the floor here. If you look closely you can see that there are in fact 9 overlapping circles etched into the ground. When Broken Faith is cast, a smallish orange circle will appear on the floor in the middle of each of these 9 circles. Do note that it's safe to run on these. What's not safe is that each one of these 9 orange circles will have a similarly sized blue disc fall on top of them. When the blue disc touches the ground, it explodes with an AoE. The AoE is the exact size of the circles etched into the floor. What makes this tricky is that the blue discs fall quite quickly and in a random order, and are much smaller than the AoE they will explode into, which catches people out. Let's take a look at the floor again. Inside each of the circles around the edges of the room is a sort of triangle shape where neither of the circles on the sides touch. When the blue disc drops on this circle, the triangle here is obviously not safe. But once the disc has landed, those triangles become safe spots. The best way to avoid this attack is to try and spot which discs are coming down first, let them hit the ground and then run into this triangle and wait out the rest of the move. Now then, that's enough graphic talk, let's see the real thing. Here I'm tanking the boss. The orange circles appear and I wait. As soon as I see a blue disc, I move out of the way and wait for it to land. Once it lands, I immediately run into the triangle and GG. Let's see another example. Here I'm healing. The orange circles appear and I keep an eye out for the blue discs. As soon as the first lands, I run into the triangle safe zone whilst carefully dancing between the discs landing on either side. GG. This move 100% catches out people every run, and in addition to dealing quite high damage, it also applies vulnerability. If someone is going to die in this fight, this is the move that will kill them, so it's good to have a solid understanding of how to deal with it. With that said, this is very chaotic, so if you take a hit you definitely won't be the only one, so don't kick yourself. Moving on, at 10% the boss will become invulnerable and start the add phase. This is split into kill adds and then stack up and avoid AoEs, and repeats about 3 times. The adds will spawn in 2 groups of 5, one group on either side. The tank and off tank can pick these up and try and group them for AoE, they do die quite fast. Once they're dead, some untargetable figures will spawn around the edges, these you don't need to pick up. When this happens, 1 player will get a stack up marker and 3 players will get AoE indicators. The 3 AoE players need to spread out, and everyone who isn't marked with an AoE needs to stack up to split the stack up damage. After this you'll get adds again, then the AoEs, and then adds once more. After the 3rd group of adds goes down, this phase is complete. There's also 2 completely random line AoEs to trigger during the 2nd AoE part, but that's very odd. I don't know why they have these in here, okay. Now there is Fervour of the Ancients in the duty gauge that increases during this phase, but you can ignore it completely because this phase is not a DPS check anymore. 3 adds down and Hades will transition the fight, get quite big, and occupy one side of the room, becoming immobile. As you can imagine, this comes with more mechanics. For this phase, the mechanics always come in a set order. This order specifically. The first to mention is Titanomachi. This is just group-wide damage, so healers get your group heals out. After this, we'll get a Shadow Stream. This isn't so visually obvious, but Hades' chest area will glow red, and once cast he will do an unmarked AoE through the centre of the room. Just move to the sides as soon as you see this to avoid. Next we have the upgraded Tank Buster Dual Strike, which targets both tanks. Remember, they deal AoE damage around them, so make sure you move away from your party. The next attack to cover is called Echo of the Lost. This is basically another unmarked AoE. For this, Hades will stretch either one of his arms forward over one side of the room. When you see this, move yourself under or behind this arm. Once the attack goes off, he will swipe the room, hitting anyone in the way. After the swipe, move back into the middle for Polydegmon's Purgation. For this attack, the boss will hover his wings over either side of the room before hitting them with an AoE. As long as you're standing in the middle area, you'll remain untouched. We'll have another Titanomachi for the healers before the tanks get marked for Hellborn Yorp. For this mechanic, after a short amount of time, Hades will send a massive cone AoE in the direction that both of the tanks were positioned in. Usually this is easiest to avoid by having the tanks move to the side of the room, drop the AoE, and then run back to safety. I will say that while you don't really need to remember the boss's attack order, the indication for Hellborn Yorp is easy to miss in all of the spell effects, so as a tank it might be worth remembering to expect this after Polydegmon's Purgation. Hades will follow this with another arm stretch Echo of the Lost, but this time it will be the opposite arm. Captivity comes next, signified by 2 players getting marked with this medium-sized AoE. When it goes off, all players hit by the move will get removed from the fight and placed in an ethereal jail. Everyone else needs to kill this jail to set them free. Obviously you want to make sure that only the 2 marked players get jailed here, because if you don't break the jail in time, the players inside get killed. After the jailbreak, we'll get another Dual Strike Tank Buster, however all non-tanks will also get targeted by small AoE circles of their own. These will each have little glowing tethers to various spots on the boss, but this is just cosmetic. Everyone spread out and avoid overlapping hits. Next up is Doom. Here, 5 white circles appear on the floor. Have at least 1 player stand in each circle at the same time to remove the Doom debuff that will kill everyone. As you can imagine, this is very easy to deal with. The final mechanic in this sequence is Wail of the Lost, however you'll likely not see it because the boss will transition to the final phase if DPS is high enough. This attack is simply a knockback from the centre of the room. As long as you're not standing right next to the edge, you can basically ignore it. Sequence finished, Hades will attempt to end you all with Life in Captivity. This is a short cutscene interrupted with an active time maneuver. Once this appears, just spam buttons on your keyboard to fill up the bar. If you somehow didn't do this, you will die. After this, we'll enter the final phase of the fight. This is a very simple burn phase. If you're a melee DPS, you can pop your level 3 limit break immediately for a burst of damage. Hades will constantly AoE the group, so healers will need to do a bit of AoE healing, but it's not that bad. Do try to stay in the middle though to make group healing easier. There is a further mechanic here which comes into play if your DPS is really low, but this wasn't a factor in all 14 runs I did for this guide, so there's no real point in explaining it. Your DPS will be more than enough. Burn Hades down, and the fight ends. And that's the dying. If you've enjoyed the guide, then let me know, and if there are any other guides or perspectives you'd like to see, then check out my channel, or feel free to ask me to create one. Thank you for watching, and good luck.